Many people have declared that the crew members present to hear Luffy's real dream in Chapter 1060 will be the final lineup for the Straw Hat crew. And while I've been quite convinced of that myself for the longest time, I had a very interesting conversation with a great theory crafter, Mr. Bushido, which has begun to make me feel that the Straw Hat lineup's got a bit more room to grow. And that's where 1X Drake enters the stage. Not only is this theory broken down multiple plot points that support it, but the flow of time between each of these events also realistically set it up. So let's talk about Drake being in Wano first. Drake's involvement in Wano felt like an interesting part of the story, though for most of the arc, not much can really be said for how much he added to it. We get the reveal that he was a member of SWORD, undercover as a Toby Roppo for Kaido's crew. He had a skirmish with some of the Straw Hats at the bathhouse, and then again at Yasui's execution. He allowed Law to escape imprisonment and subdue Hawkins, which all of these were pretty fun to watch, but didn't have an overall impact on the arc. However, it wasn't until the raid on Onigashima where his role would become critical to the setup of him joining the crew later in the story. While Drake was escaping Queen and runs into Luffy, he asks to team up. The crew's reaction to this was very similar to when Robin asked after the Alabasta arc, and she came out of the cabin all suave. As this is happening, we see a little bit of a flashback between Kobe and Drake, where he's talking Luffy up and how it's just in his nature to create allies around him, whether they were pirates or marines. Which is also a little bit of a callback to when Mihawk said the exact same thing during the Marineford War. At first, this comes off as a confusing concept to Drake, like, just creating allies, like what are you talking about? But just like with Law and Kid and some of the other supernovas, it seems to be slowly working as we see Drake come to the realization that Luffy is just a positive factor in this world and someone whose very nature it is to help others. Now, in stories, there's always a reason for something to move the plot along or for information to be revealed to the reader. And there's one scene in particular that should stand out above any of the others. And that's the moment when Drake gets up and stabs Guernica in the back to prevent him from moving to the rooftop with Kaido and Luffy. Now, say that Drake didn't stab Guernica. What do you think would have changed? Probably nothing, honestly. He ended up going to the rooftop anyways. So did Oda waste time and resources making the scene, or did he want to make an impression to the readers on Drake's thought process towards Luffy? It wasn't that Drake was supposed to stop Guernica, it was to show us his thought process and the increasing value that Drake was having for Luffy. Because of the scene, we see Drake as a man who always chooses to do what's right. He saw Luffy as the man who needed protection in this whole scenario, the pirate who would save Wano, and not the Navy or Marines, showing his convictions to his beliefs on who had true justice in mind for the land of Wano, and the world in general, since they were up against two emperors of the sea. That being said, it seems like Oda's going out of his way to show us Drake generally wants to aid Luffy as a pirate. Now think back to Punk Hazard. There's a line Kuzan told Smoker after saving him from Doflamingo, and that it was his time away from the Marines that showed him just how the world really was. In the current day, Drake has been away from the Marines for a few years. We saw him in Sabaody before the time skip. We saw him on a winter island looking for Kaido. He ends up being a vital part of Kaido's crew, one of the top officers, and during that time he's starting to truly see how the world works and what it's like outside of Marine affiliation. That it's not always that the Marines are the good and all the pirates are the bad. It's not so black and white as the Marines and the world government would like you to believe. Even as a member of SWORD, he's become disillusioned with the process of justice and now sees them as the problem, not the solution, which is why Drake will end up reaching out to the Straw Hats as the ones who are truly serving the greater good. They help people not because they want some kind of reward or payment or tribute, some kind of monument to them, but just because that's how they are. They just genuinely want to help people. That's why he joined the Marines, is to genuinely help people. Now, Drake's dream can be explained a little bit later, but so far I would say he wants to discover the truth behind the world government and what's going on behind the curtain. He wants to expose their secrets to the world and liberate them from tyranny so that everyone can seek freedom and justice just like he does. Doing so would make him probably a good revolutionary. However, I think they've got enough players on their team where it wouldn't really add much to them if Drake joined. As for his role, I believe he will act as a sort of guardian of the crew, a protector. Going into the events leading up to Drake's appearance in Egghead, there are a few things that I believe will happen. First is that the Sunny's going to be damaged, as it was hinted with Kid's ship in Elbaf being destroyed and Law's ship on Winter Island being destroyed, when Lucci saw the Sunny, the first thing that he tried to do was destroy it. Lucci has also been leaking details to the world government behind the Straw Hats' back, like where they are, their plan of escape, who's with them. Fast forward a little bit and we now have both Kizaru and St. J. Garcia on the field. We saw Freaky telling Vegapunk that they can use the Sunny to shoot away from the island with the coup de burst, and when Kizaru saw the Vega Force carrying the ship, that was the first thing that he went after, because he knew about the coup de burst. He was after their escape route. It's noted that destroying the ship will cut off the Straw Hats' escape route, which is why I think it was important that Zoro stayed behind to guard the ship. However, we know both Zoro and Brook have taken off from the ship since their arrival, so in this arc, it's definitely going to be attacked by Kizaru or St. J. Garcia. It's going to be damaged, but the crew's going to come to its aid before it's fully destroyed. And because of that damage, it's going to need an upgrade in the future, but that's honestly another theory entirely that we'll have to touch on another time. Next is the crew itself. Luffy was busy fighting Kizaru, Zoro's with Lucci, Sanji left to look for Bonnie, and Jinbei left to help Vegapunk bring supplies to the ship. No one is there to protect it or the rest of the crew when this happens. Kizaru went straight for the crew and grabbed Usopp while he was looking for Vegapunk, seeing as Luffy was, off distracted elsewhere in Gear 5. There's a similar scene back in Wano where Apu attacked Chopper so he could get the cure to the Isoni virus away from him, and Drake jumped in and stopped him, telling Zoro to go to the roof and leave the floor to him. Drake is the bodyguard of the crew, and his job is going to be to take care of all the small fry around them so the rest of the crew can deal with the big players. But how does Drake get to Egghead? At the start of the arc, we're told that he's missing, which is a bit of a Chekhov's gun, something that gets set up now to be relevant later. So let's talk about some of Drake's connections to Egghead that were set up even earlier in the story. When we met him in Sabaody, Drake fought a pacifista thinking it was Kuma until it shot a laser, and Drake immediately figured out what it was and told himself, "So you finally did it, Vegapunk." To call someone out by their name without some sort of honorific, especially in Japanese culture, is either extremely rude or just shows how close you are to that person. So by calling him just Vegapunk and not Dr. Vegapunk like Kobe and the others suggests a level of closeness between them. There are also certain things about Drake revealed in an SBS, such as his favorite hobbies like astrophysics and reptiles. Astrophysics being the study of celestial bodies, or any body that consists in space. Egghead can be considered the celestial arc, with St. J. Garcia being in the field as one of the 5 elder stars. Vega is a star that used to be the North Star until over time the rotations changed, but the Vega star has helped the earlier astrophysicists discover how the solar system works. Vegapunk also created 6 clones, which he calls satellites, which means the celestial body that orbits a planet. And the main body himself is named Stella. Stella meaning star like an interstellar, which also means traveling between stars. Egghead is the arc we learn the names of the Gorsei, which means 5 elder stars, and they are all named after planets, and Saturn is there right now. I also wanted to note that Blackbeard's ship is lurking around in the background, who, might I add, can create black holes, another celestial event. Many things are lining up with how Oda set up Drake to love these particular hobbies and subjects, especially when the overall theme of this arc is the Celestials. Now, after Drake damaged a pacifista, he said it was weird his blood was red, which was a very peculiar thing to say back then, and that's because we know now that Drake knew that the pacifista's bloods were supposed to be green. And in addition, with chapter 1100 this week, we have confirmation that Drake indeed visited Egghead with Kizaru in Kuma's flashback. After Sabaody during the time skip, Drake ends up traveling to what is stated as Kaido's favorite island. Now, do you notice how everything is made of metal, or at least most of the buildings are made of metal? In the anime, they included an extra scene of a dome opening up to reveal a fortress, and honestly, if you ask me, the design is suspiciously similar to when Luffy, Bonnie, Jinbei, and Chopper first walked into the indoor lab of Egghead. For these reasons, it's clear that Drake is connected to this arc and will be involved at some point. But there's still one more thing to address, and that's how he will arrive. Think back to chapters 674 to 731. Now, I know that's a big ask, but what I'm talking about specifically is Caribou's cover story. Drake had at one point taken down Caribou and captured him. Now, as Gru said, Drake is not reporting in and is missing, which could mean he is deliberately not contacting Sword and he's just done with them, but that wouldn't be quite right, you know, with Drake's character. It's much more likely that if he was done and over with Sword, he would actually resign and they would have had contacted him. So what if instead he's in a position where he just physically can't speak? After Onigashima came down, Drake himself was completely worn out after the war. We saw him basically on his back. He had his interaction with Hawkins. The whole 1% man thing happened, and that was the last time we saw him. Now, Caribou was also in the mix when Luffy went back up to Onigashima on Momo's back. If the island had come down near him and Caribou had any idea that Drake was involved in the battle on Onigashima, he more than likely went to scout things out for whoever he's an informant of and ran into Drake. And what do you think Caribou would have done to get back at Drake for capturing him during the cover story? He would have absorbed him into his devil fruit. And guess where Caribou is now? He's on the Straw Hat ship at Egghead. Yep. Everything is coming together. With the idea or theme of the Sunny being damaged at one point, it's very likely to believe that Caribou is going to be knocked off the ship. He's going to fall into the ocean, lose control of his devil fruit powers, and inadvertently release Drake out into Egghead, who will also kind of be at the mercy of the ocean. But I mean, that we'll figure that out when it happens. It's a lot of setup. And while this channel isn't necessarily devoted to making theories, having this shared with me by Mr. Bushido was a really fun topic that I just wanted to dive into and explore, kind of elaborate a little bit on, and really just share it with everyone else here. If you enjoyed the topic, make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe. Helps me out, helps you out, have one more One Piece content. A lot of the content that's been released lately has been shorts, but I've got a thumbnail editor now, which is very exciting, so you can definitely expect to see more videos coming out on a much more consistent basis. I know I've said that before in the past, but I promise. Just subscribe and you'll see. Leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are on the topic at hand. I'd love to know how you guys feel about Drake joining the crew, if you think Drake is going to end up here in Egghead, or could they still be open to bringing other members into the crew during the final saga. Stay tuned, and everyone have a wonderful night.